Hello, BookTube, YouTube, AuthorTube, whoever you are. Welcome back to my channel. I am talking about what I've been reading lately. I teach English, so I end up reading a lot of stories, poems, plays, and things like that, but I also enjoy, of course, reading for pleasure. And I've been diving into the world of Stephen King, trying to get through all of his books, and relatively recently I finished reading Black House. I think in my last post I said that I'd finished reading Black House, but I wanted to talk about, I guess, some of my connections that I've been thinking about related to Black House. There is a morbid but beautifully written passage by Stephen King and Peter Straub that talks about something called slippage, and how often in border towns or on the borders of different worlds, on the borders of anything, a lot of times things just kind of start falling apart and that's kind of how I've been feeling lately. I'm using my phone right now, but my phone had slippage because I guess it broke or I dropped it. It wasn't cracked or anything, but it was just not working, and so I felt pathetic not being able to access, the camera and the tools, and I've gone through all of my razors, so I'm not shaving. That's why I got this little teenage scruff around my face. So I need to go to the store to get razors. That kind of slippage, just whiny kind of. The real slippage for me comes from this sort of project. I have essays to grade, and so far the essays they're going great. They are about movies, so I like reading about that. It just takes a while to read them, and so I tell myself that each day I'm going to grade 6 essays. However, if the weekend rolls around and we get too busy, or I'm having too good of a time, like during the Oscars, or somebody in the family gets sick or something like that, or if I get sick, then I fall behind, and that feels like slippage as well. My office becomes terribly messy and unorganized, and I'm talking about, I guess, 2 offices, my office at work and my home office. So when that kind of slippage happens and I feel overwhelmed by all of the papers that I have to grade, then I certainly don't work on any of my writing projects. But the good news is I fell behind on my 6 essays a day, and yet I have managed to crawl my way back, so I should be finishing these by Tuesday. If I just grade 6 essays a day, I will be done with all of the essays by Tuesday. So I've been reading those. What did I read by Stephen King lately? I finished Cell. So Cell was a fun book. This is perhaps not, maybe not the most original idea from Stephen King. It has some quirky, fun ideas in it. I didn't know what it was going to be about other than your number is up, cell, and 911, and a cracked phone, and something on the inside, and explosions in the background. And I had heard, because I try not to read the back of these things, I want to be surprised, but I had somehow heard, because I believe they made a film of it, and so I heard that it was a story about cell phones making people go crazy and attack one another. And that is what happens, and a little bit more than that, the people that listen to the message on the cell phone lose their minds permanently and become kind of zombie-like, but different. So it was fun because on the one hand, it just starts off like a typical zombie-style apocalypse, but then as things progress, and I don't want to use my BookTube to give things away, but as things progress, they become different than your classic zombie-type creatures, or subhumans, or whatever you want to call them. So that was fun. The zombie aspect aside, what I liked about Cell was the core conflict was a father trying to get to his son and save his son. As a parent, I find those plots very relatable, so I had a good time with Cell. What else have I been reading? I have been exploring different, I've been rereading some of the classics. Now, this is for my job. I teach a world literature class, and I also, on a regular basis, teach Introduction to Literature. So it's not uncommon to read lots of short stories again and again, but for, I think, the 4th time in my life, I read Candide by Voltaire. What I loved about this reading of Candide, if you don't know the story of Candide, it is a satirical journey about a young man named Candide who has a tutor who convinces him that this is the best of all possible worlds. This takes place hundreds of years ago, or this takes place, I think it's written in the 1700s. And so throughout the course of the book, Candide experiences horrible things: warfare, torture, slavery, just awful things. So he's constantly wondering, if this is the best of all possible worlds, what are the rest of the worlds like? So my favorite takeaway from Candide for this reading, my fourth reading, has been the El Dorado sequence. There is a moment where Candide and his companion, they discover the lost city of El Dorado, where the ground is made up of jewels and gold is everywhere, but the people in El Dorado, they don't care about wealth or money or riches, you know, those types of things, and they're living a peaceful, very fulfilling life. And Candide, I guess I am going to give a spoiler, Candide decides, after staying in El Dorado maybe a few weeks or a month, that he doesn't want to stay there anymore. He wants to go off and find the love of his life, Cunegonde, so he wants to be reunited with her. And the people of El Dorado are saying, you know, you shouldn't leave. You're going to regret that choice. And ultimately, he kind of does. He takes a whole bunch of gold, but that's really what I think motivating him. He wants to take all of the gold because it's worthless to the people of El Dorado. And in El Dorado, even though you are happy and you are in paradise, Candide feels like, hey, we're the same as everybody else around here. But if we take all of these jewels and all of this gold, then we're going to be superior to people. So he leaves. And basically the message that I get is that sometimes you don't realize that you have a very good thing and that you shouldn't leave that good thing. So I think that's common sense, but I thought it was a pretty valuable message, and I enjoyed picking up on that. What else have I been reading? We've been reading some ghazals by Ghalib. Ghazals are a form of Persian poetry, and I have also been reading Charles Baudelaire. For the second time, I've been reading Flowers of Evil, and I don't think I like it. When I read it the first time years ago, I enjoyed the shock value, but now Charles Baudelaire is coming off to me as sort of a spoiled mama's boy, and I can relate to that. Maybe I relate to that too much. He gets on my nerves. I think I'd rather read Charles Bukowski if I'm going to read something that's in the category of profane poetry. I read the story by Anton Chekhov of The Lady with the Dog, and this was actually the first time that I read this story, and I didn't tell my students that I hadn't read it before. I should have read it a long time ago. It's one of those classic stories, and I really like Anton Chekhov, so it was a fun story. You know, I have to admit that I thought the dog was going to be more prominent in the story. I thought, like, ooh, what trouble is the dog gonna get these guys into? And the Pomeranian doesn't really do anything. We had a great discussion in my class about The Lady with the Dog, and some students observed, because it's a story about infidelity, and the lady with the dog and the male protagonist, they have an affair with each other, and yet at the same time, they don't necessarily seem to love each other. And a romantic love is not mentioned until towards the end, when our protagonist looks in the mirror and sees himself and realizes that he's gotten older, and then it says that he falls in love. And so some of us wondered if he falls in love because he realizes he's getting older, and therefore he's very appreciative of having this young mistress, the lady with the dog. Or, another student pointed out, it says that he finally falls in love, but it doesn't say that he falls in love with the lady and the dog, and that maybe he's really falling in love with himself. So Chekhov is fun because there's lots of different ways to interpret it. I also read The Cherry Orchard, probably for time number 3, I think. And Chekhov on stage is always very quirky and, again, open to interpretation. I love thinking of how Stanislavski felt that Chekhov's last play, The Cherry Orchard, was a great Russian tragedy. However, Chekhov's wife felt that it was a delightful farce, and that's probably how Chekhov viewed it, that there's a lot of sad backstories for these characters, but at the same time, they're very foolhardy and very human, and I think that we can, not in a mean-spirited way, we can laugh at these characters if we have the ability to look at ourselves and laugh. Last up on my reading roundup, I am currently listening to the audiobook version of Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and Owen King. So it's a father and son project, and I like listening to it, trying to figure out when is Stephen King writing something, when is Owen King, and I don't know if I can really tell for sure. There's some moments where I think, oh, that doesn't quite sound like Stephen King's writing, so maybe that's Owen, but I might be way wrong. The book itself has, I think, a very unique and engaging plot. Something has happened, something strange and supernatural has happened, so that all of the women of the world, once they fall asleep, they stay asleep. They get wrapped up in a cocoon. And so the story has many different levels to it. It's certainly an ensemble piece. There's lots of different characters. And I am about 2/3 of the way through it. And as the days pass in the story, more and more women fall asleep. And so it's been fun to see where the plot is going, and also fun to see which characters are staying awake. So if you have read any of those classics and you want to chime in about Chekhov or Baudelaire or Candide, Voltaire's Candide, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on them. If you are reading any of the Stephen King books, I'd love to know your opinion. Try not to give away any spoilers, because I'm still reading Sleeping Beauty and other people might be reading the newer stuff. And that's my BookTube report for today. Thanks, and I hope you, if you like listening to me ramble on about my reading projects, please like and subscribe.